Over the weekend, Wizards of the Coast with support from Reed Pop hosted MagicCon Chicago. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this event, MagicCon is a convention dedicated to the popular trading card game Magic the Gathering. Here they hosted panels to deliver exciting news about upcoming releases for the game. They had casual play events, and they also had tournaments. Now, what makes this event more significant, however, is that this is the first time MagicCon featured Dungeons and Dragons in its history. I was fortunate enough to get a press badge to go attend, and so I was able to check out that side of the convention that featured all the Dungeons and Dragons events and products and all the things that they had to show off. But what did it mean for MagicCon to feature Dungeons and Dragons? And what was this experience like as an attendee? And is this a convention that you should go to if you're a Dungeons and Dragons player or enthusiast? Hi, my name is Sean. I'm also known as Crit Hit the Giant online. And in this video, we're going to talk about my experience when I went to MagicCon for the sole purpose of checking out Dungeons and Dragons events at the convention. So if you're here wanting to see what MagicCon was like for Magic the Gathering, this is probably not the video for you, but if you're interested in learning more about what the Dungeons and Dragons experience was like at that convention, stick around. I can tell you a little bit more about that. So to start off with, let me reiterate that MagicCon is exclusively and specifically a convention all about the popular trading card game Magic the Gathering. So to compare this convention to something like Gen Con or PAX Unplugged, we'll do it a disservice when we try to look at what this convention is like and compare it with how Dungeons and Dragons is handled and showed off and displayed and played at other conventions. But with that being said, when you look at the list of panels and events in their programming schedule, it was really surprising how big of a presence Dungeons and Dragons had at MagicCon. Over the course of the weekend, there were a lot of events that were connected and specifically tied to Dungeons and Dragons. There were a few actual plays that they had and a couple of panels as well too. On Friday, there was one panel entitled Here Be Dragons, which featured dragons, shocker, I know, from both Magic the Gathering and the new monster manual from Dungeons and Dragons. On the panel, they had Jess Lanzillo, who is the Vice President for Product and Franchise for Dungeons and Dragons, and she discussed the history of dragons in the game of Dungeons and Dragons, and they also showed off some of the artwork that developed and progressed from when the game first started to where they're at now. And during the panel, she also dived into the personalities of each kind of dragon, which was really cool to see, like how much she got into it, and she shared her personal history and fascination with dragons and how she always loved it growing up. And at that panel, she revealed the covers and alternate cover for Dragondel, which is a adventure anthology series that's coming out on July 8th that's going to feature 10 dragons and 10 dungeons in each of the adventures. And then Saturday evening, I got to attend for the first time a live actual play. MagicCon hosted D&D Live Baldur's Gate from Hags to Liches, and this featured the Dungeon Master Abria Iyengar, and joining her was the cast members from Baldur's Gate 3, Neil Newbin, who played Astarion, Samantha Bayard, who played Karlach, Theo Solomon, who played Will, and Deborah Wild, who played Lizelle. And as a fan of D&D and Baldur's Gate 3, I was really excited about this, and I gotta say, go watch it. I might be able to put a link in the video, or if not, I'll put it in the notes below, along with some other links that is really important for you to check out. But this was really chaotic and a lot of fun to be there and watch, and so I think if you love that kind of energy, this is definitely a video that you should watch. So those were programs and panels and events that they had for Dungeons & Dragons at MagicCon, but you could also play Dungeons and Dragons there as well too. So when they said they were featuring Dungeons and Dragons, it wasn't done lightly. In fact, they even had the pinball machines that they announced that they were doing for that was Dungeons and Dragons themed. They had that there as well too. So it's pretty cool to try to get those out and play those games. But over the course of the weekend, you could play in multiple sessions of Dungeons and Dragons. So the main organizer for those events were Ballman Games, which if you've ever done any of their games, you know that they run it really well. They're great people to work with. They're great games to play in. I absolutely love it when they show up at a convention because I know I'm going to get a high quality game. So they were the main organizers for the majority of the Dungeons and Dragons sessions that were there. There was a Learn to Play D&D that was hosted on the main floor where the most of the convention was being held at. And so that was really cool to see that people can drop in and learn how to play D&D from 30 minutes to 2 hours to get a glimpse of how to play the game. There are also a number of different kinds of adventures and campaigns and one-shots of D&D that you can play there as well too. For example, they had a single event called Stormbreak, a Tarkir adventure, which was themed around the upcoming Magic the Gathering setting and deck series that they're going to release in April. So you could play a Dungeons and Dragons game that was based in a Magic the Gathering setting, which is a really cool idea. There was also a MagicCon one-shot exclusive called Thunder Over the Forsaken Isle that was created and ran by the Level Eater Adventurers, which is not affiliated with Baldman Games, just so you know. And then there were multi-day sessions of campaigns of the Legends of Greyhawk Adventures, which is the new convention campaign play being offered by the team of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, the Legends of Greyhawk Adventures series was probably the most prominent gameplay that was there at MagicCon Chicago. So it was all focused on the setting of Greyhawk, which makes sense because this is the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons. That was the very first official setting that was created by Gary Gygax. And the new Dungeon Master's Guide also had a lot of material about Greyhawk in there as well, too. So it was really cool to see some of the material from the Dungeon Master's Guide making its way into these adventures. Now, if you're not familiar with what Legends of Greyhawk Adventures are, it is the new organized play that the Dungeons & Dragons team are releasing. So this is separate from the Adventures League, and they're doing a lot of new things about this kind of organized convention style play that is going to be really cool to see. And I got to do that this weekend. And some of the things that they included is some of the things that they had in the Dungeon Master's Guide, like marks of prestige you get to have after completing a one-shot or a campaign adventure for one of the sessions. They gave you magic items that had physical cards that told you what magic item you've earned from that session. And the idea is that you take those physical cards with you to show that you've earned that when you take your character to the next adventure in the Legends of Greyhawk Adventures that you're going to be playing in. Now, one of the other things about the Legends of Greyhawk Adventures is that this is going to be powered with D&D Beyond. So they're heavily focusing on making sure that you create your characters using a D&D Beyond account. Now, as somebody who has used D&D Beyond for their digital character sheets, and I'll be honest to say that all my characters I've made have been in D&D Beyond, I also know there are limitations with that happening at the convention where there's technology issues like Wi-Fi connections, or you might have an issue with your device, or maybe you forgot to bring a battery pack and now your device is dead in the middle of the gameplay. And so it's really interesting to see how this plays out. But if you want to learn more about what Legends of Greyhawk Adventures are and their plans for it in the future, I'll put a link in the description as well, too, for you to check out. And as someone who has primarily played in either homebrew settings or Forgotten Realms, this was probably the second time I've done the Greyhawk setting, and this was actually a lot of fun. I had a blast playing at a table with people I had never met before, and by the end of it, we all just talked about how much we loved that game, how much fun we had, and just how everybody brought something different to the table that was just, just made it feel like this was why we were there, is to enjoy D&D and enjoy playing games with each other. But what was also cool is that at the end of the adventure, you would get a little card that says like 100 points or something like that, and you can collect those cards at the end of each adventure that you play, and then you take it to the Ballman Games shop, and you can purchase different things with those cards. You can purchase a set of dice, some adventure books that they have from Wizards of the Coast, things like that. So even though you paid $40 for the game, which is typically what you pay at a convention, you could walk away with getting something, for free. I know it's technically not free, but it's still a good deal if you think about how much you paid for playing the game at a convention, and then you get to walk away with some sort of product from their store. So it was a really cool experience. I really enjoyed it. Everybody there was great. I thought the adventures were just a lot of fun, and I did not feel like I wasted my time doing those games and spending my time playing Dungeons & Dragons in the new Legends of Greyhawk Adventures. By the way, there was a really cool story that someone from Ballman Games told me about Greyhawk and its history that makes it even cooler when you think about how the Legends of Greyhawk Adventures is kicking off in Chicago. So the story of Greyhawk is that it's the first setting that Gary Gygax, one of the creators of D&D, had created for his kids. And in one of the games that they were playing, he realized that he needed to create a world for the kids to come out of the dungeon and do some more things with like their magic items or that they want to sell or something like that. And so he took a map of North America and traced it. And on that new map of the world he created, he placed Greyhawk where Chicago is located on that map. So I thought that was a really cool connection. I'm sure that's probably one of the many reasons why they did Legends of Greyhawk Adventures and kicked it off at MagicCon Chicago. So just knowing that little bit of a story, that history, is just makes it even cooler when you think about like how this is kicking off in the town or in the city that Greyhawk was supposedly represented when Gary Gygax created that world. So now that MagicCon Chicago is over and I had a chance to reflect on this, the question has to be answered. Is this a D&D convention and is it worth going to? Now, is this a D&D convention? I don't know. This is something that it'll be really interesting to see what they do in the future, because I don't know if this is going to be a annual thing now that, you know, just because they kicked it off in Chicago, a MagicCon, are they still going to keep doing this at all the MagicCons? Is it going to be expanded to not just Magic the Gathering, but also D&D as well? I'm not entirely sure. So I wouldn't say that this is a D&D convention or even a tabletop role-playing game convention, but it's definitely a convention that if you want to check out things that's related to D&D without going to a huge event or something that seems to be overly focused on Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role-playing games, that you just kind of want to like a taste for it, I think this would be a great one to check out. If you're somebody that really enjoyed D&D, I think this is something that you can definitely enjoy going to, because they did have events for you that are, you know, specific to D&D that you can go to all weekend. I felt like this is a good one if you just want to take like a slow pace and a change of pace from other conventions where you go to play Dungeons and Dragons and it's like go, 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 right? I love Gen Con's one of my favorite conventions, but it's definitely one of those conventions where you're constantly doing stuff and you're moving from one event to another. MagicCon with D&D, I felt like I could go to those events and didn't feel like I was constantly having to go from one place to another and I was rushing through and wasn't able to enjoy the moment. And I felt like that's was something that I really appreciated with MagicCon featuring D&D with this. So those are my thoughts about MagicCon Chicago featuring Dungeons and Dragons. If you have any questions or comments or anything that you want to leave in the comments below, I'll be more happy to answer them for you. And while you're here, just want to let you know that we have started a live stream chat show on Twitch and YouTube where we go live every other Sunday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time to talk about Baldur's Gate 3, Dungeons & Dragons, and Forgotten Realms. So if you want to check that out, just make sure that you follow either this channel or on Twitch at Crit Hit the Giant, and we will go live on Sundays. This upcoming Sunday we'll be going live, and then we'll be going every other week after that. So take care.